what was it she and
Thank you, Lynn. And thank you to Will for reminding me we're supposed to record this. I'm a little late. I think I've just started recording it,
yeah.
so I apologize. Okay, Vijaya is next. Hi, Vijaya.
Yeah.
You
Hi.
don't have any response
See you.
to me.
You know,
No.
Vijaya is in Redding, California, and I
Yeah.
in Philadelphia, but we met up in Chicago halfway.
Yes, we did.
Such a delight to meet you in person, my friend.
So I refer to how she talks about play, how she talks about Winnicott, his explanation, where she says that where Winnicott says real is what we sense via the play of the individual and cultural imagination. And so she talks about how that's what she wants, like the imagination to be kind of connected, and this imaginative vitality, this connectedness with the world is present in anyone who thrives on curiosity, puzzling, and conjecturing. So she's kind of talking about how like inventors and explorers, when they launch out to look for what they don't know what they're going to find, but they do find something, they discover things kind of and bring it. And I love how she kind of also distinguishes between what she thinks the imagination should not do, or the poets and the artists should not work on, where she talks about to avoid imaginative engagement with material complexity, as our popular culture tends to do, is to live in a fantasy world. So she distinguishes between fantasy and imagination. And I think that made a lot of sense to me, at least.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jai. That's a great comment. I appreciate that. Lou, I think you're up next. You're muted, though.
Okay, there I am, as Lou, not Tom. I was thinking about, trying to replicate complexity in writing, and that being a strategy in writing. And I mean, because it's a failure from the start, right? Because I mean, nothing can replicate the complexity of life.
Right.
So for me, it poses also a question, like she kind of, in a way, sets herself up in opposition against the canon. All those philosophers that she quotes are like, the major philosophers. She engages with them, but it seems to me that she's also rejecting them. And so for me, it poses the question of, if we embrace alterity and diversity and complexity, where then does the monolithic fall within that paradigm, and how do we speak to it?
Wow. Wow. Well, let's address the question of the inevitable failure. Do you think that Joan builds in to any of the pieces that we've read an acknowledgement that this is an impossible project, if literally understood?
Yeah, I'd have to say she does. I would say she does.
And that's not good enough, but it's something, right?
True enough, yeah.
So I think that if we create a binary, which is not really what she wants us to do, but just as
right.
a heuristic, if we create a binary, let's take Ezra Pound looking at the metro and wanting to write an imagistic haiku-like thing to simplify and radically reduce complexity. He is not, in his statements about what he's doing, he is not the least bit admitting that it's a paradox, that he can't do it. not at all. The Imagist Manifesto, which was mostly written by Pound, basically says you must choose the exact word, not the nearly exact, but the exact word, as if such a thing existed. And everybody who contemplates Imagism 5 years later, afterwards, and the rest of history realizes that that is just bullshit. It's bluster. Joan, on the other hand, is readily, I mean, the conversation, just the very invention of Kinta-Sleff. I've asked Joan, is Kinta-Sleff just a straw antagonist? And she says, no, that Kinta-Sleff is me. Kinta-Sleff is more me than Joan Retallack. So that's it's also tricky. It's a very Cagean thing to say, but I think she readily concedes the point you're making. I don't know if that goes far enough. But what do you think, Lou?
Yeah, I don't know if it goes far enough either. So maybe we could leave it at that. It's a question I'm pursuing, we could say.
Yeah. Lou, let me try one more thing with you, if you don't mind. I'm going to read another sentence from None Too Soon from that poem. Yearning minds conjure thoughts bound to deform the musculature of the most determined smile. I'll read it again and see if this relates at all to what we're saying. Yearning minds conjure thoughts bound to deform the musculature of the most determined smile. Any idea about that?
She gives in that sentence or line a tremendous power to thought, which is kind of interesting because it also makes me think of the mind-body connection. Like you raise your arm and you don't think about how you raise your arm. You don't tell your arm to go up in the air, and you think it, and it, you want to do something and you raise your arm.
Yeah.
So yearning minds conjure thoughts that are bound to deform a musculature.
Yes.
The musculature is like the structure, the framework, the conventional, you might say, the systemic in which we live. And I love that she gives so much power to thought. That's wonderful.
Thought is more powerful than the facial infrastructure, muscular infrastructure that creates a smile, not just a frown. It does equally create a frown, but in this instance, it's a smile. And, I don't know, how many of you, who do you think of? What kind of person do you think of who has a determined smile? Anybody throw it out? Just toss it out. Who are the people in our world who have the determined smiles?
Politicians.
Salesmen.
Politicians.
Media people.
The woman who, the hygienist who takes care of my teeth. Like, I am so afraid of dentists, and she's got that smile that I don't see as friendly. Because the determined smile, it's a cartoon character fake, right? It's like, hi, I'm running for president. I'm the nicest person you'll ever meet. Bill Clinton's smile, if I may, So she's saying yearning minds, which is a lot of people here tonight have said, in one way or other, that Joan is all about the mind yearning, not the mind. That's the Sid Corman thing, not the mind that has figured out what to write about Pip in London, but the mind that doesn't know what it's writing about, that is in the process of discovering composition. That is the mind that conjures thoughts that will deform the musculature, that will ruin the determined smile. Deform. So Lou is right on by talking about the mind-body problem. And here she's associating mind with ethics, with complexity, and with feminism. And the determined smile with the driven narrative of aggression and possession and thatness, thisness, the thing that determines what content is. And I'm making more of a binarism out of it than she is, because it's a very funny line. She's obviously having a good time with that. It's not so serious. But I think therein lies a kind of politics. Even in this very apolitical or seemingly apolitical writing. Apolitical for one thing, because most people who want to do politics don't understand it or have the time to study it the way we have. She's not deterred by that. She wants things to be really complicated because that is the ethical move. Anyway, Lou, thank you for bringing up the interesting topic and for doing the close reading of that line. Appreciate it. Barbara Nilsson is up next. Hi, Barbara.
Oh, hello, everybody. I really sense that to tackle this complexity that she's urging us to tackle requires community. This kind of engagement can't really be done on one's own, and she's even engaging herself in this particular piece we're reading. So even when you're alone, you're engaging in a complicated way. And I'll just a short anecdote. The little poem about the tortoise and the hare was just, I was already stuck. That seemed like it should be simple. I couldn't make any sense of it in the way I'm used to. I'm pretty logical. And then people were talking about it as a Z, and I'm not visual, but it didn't look exactly like a Z. But somebody talked about it as a rabbit. And I sort of went back to it. And then I went to a cartoon of a rabbit, and then I could see a rabbit. And then I was back at that beginning, which introduces the whole book, I guess, that little tortoise poem, or at least it's the first thing we see. And I thought it must be important. So I kept trying to engage it with all of these other engagements and the things people were saying. And all of a sudden, I thought, okay, there's a fable and a nursery rhyme.
Yeah.
What's this other story? And it just hit me, I think, because of the rabbit imagery, and that it was maybe the white rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. Because it was a different species, which rabbits aren't hares. They're different species. It's a different story and a different gender. And then I thought, and the white rabbit is always late. And then I thought, well, the white rabbit is led Alice to Wonderland, but the tortoise is left in the dust. And Wonderland is certainly different from white Western culture. And I would have never gotten there by myself. I would have shut the book and said, I'm taking this back to the library. So I think this idea of doing it together, and not that would be anybody else's interpretation, but it helped me grab it in a way that I hadn't been able to, but I couldn't have gotten there by myself. So I think it's about engagement, communal engagement.
Yeah. Well, it's not simply that Joan is writing a difficult poetry that requires us to work together. That would be enough. That would be sufficient. But that she actually believes in the importance, the centrality of that activity. In 1999, Joan, who was she's now retired from working at Bard College, so she lives up there still. But at the time, she was directing the Center for Thinking and Writing, or some Bard-like center like that. And she organized a conference called Alt Poetics, Alt Pedagogy. There might even been an equal sign between the two phrases, Alt Poetics, Alt Pedagogy. Of course, the minute I saw that, I thought, I signed up, and not only did I go, but I brought about 5 or 6 people from the writer's house. I said, we have to talk about this. And it was like 3 or 4 days of people talking about the necessary relationship between this kind of poetry and this kind of teaching learning, of the sort that Barbara was just referring to as crucial for understanding. That is the basis of the idea that's in ModPo and all of my teaching, and indeed in the Writer's House, that of collaborative close reading, that is basically the only way you can proceed to deal with poetry that is quote unquote difficult. So up with difficulty, 3 cheers for difficulty, because it requires community in order to deal with it. Something that is simple, that doesn't require community, takes the communitarian aspect out of the intention of someone like Joan. So it's kind of built in. It's like it's a little thing that goes off, a little tiny thing, a trigger that goes off in the poem that says, community required, community required. Barbara can't do this by herself. Barbara will quit. Don't let Barbara quit. Join her. Find the rabbit, find the Z. I just think it's a little machine, a community making machine. Poems are community making machines. And I'll never stop wanting.
Nice.
I can never get bored, because I've been teaching the same damn poetry. I add a little bit to it, but for 38 years at Penn, 38 years, I'm never bored, because the little machine that creates one group after another, and there's always something else that comes out of it. Amazing. Thank you. CJ Prince, you are up next. What's up?
Hi, Al, and everybody, all the familiar faces and new faces. There's so much to say about her. I love her writing, and I love Cage. And it's, you know, I go back to the first thing everyone talked about was reality, what is real. And that's an ancient kind of philosophical discussion that I'm not going to pretend to know what's real, because it always, you can't always replicate what was real in the now. So, and the imagination is essential. The way she writes, the way she's in the Z poem, the words aren't complete until the next line. There'll be like one. And when I read it out loud to myself, my dog and cat love it. I have a new dog. And so I'm testing his critical ability.
Your new dog.
Oh, you will love this, Al. My new dog is a 7-month-old Havanese, and his name is Juan Pablo Diego. Pablo Diego y Principe. I am.
And what do you call him for short?
Juan Pablo.
Juan Pablo. Great.
Yeah. I don't want to shorten it, make it too, you know, although I use CJ, I don't want to use his initials. And he responds to it already. Of course, he had another name before he came. And because he's under my rocking chair, I have to very still.
Wow, be careful.
But I'm very glad that he likes poetry and is not bouncing around right now. I want to talk about the format that she uses that shifts us away from the expectation of poetry that, oh, it's got to be this way, it's got to rhyme. It's just breaking all of the, it's totally going into the experimental. And I like reading it and pausing in the middle of the word before I go to the next line, because it does something in my mind in a different way.
Yeah.
Oh, and I mentioned John Cage. That's pretty much what I wanted to say. And I thank everybody for their comments.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you so much. Well, shall we try to listen to a poem? I'm going to play a poem by Joan that about 2/3 of you already know. And maybe we can talk about it and then conclude after talking about it a little bit with some final thoughts. Okay, so I'm going to play Not a Cage, which many of you know. Does anybody want to set it up and tell us what Not a Cage does, what it's about? Who dares to remember that from ModPo? Nobody's got the nerve to do that. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I will explain it, and then I'll play it, and then I'll give you a link to the text. Joan was getting rid of books from her bookshelf. She was, you know, I don't know, moving or cleaning out her house. I don't know. How many of you, just wave your hand if you have more books than you really can handle? And of course, Kim is actually, Kim, it's about to fall on you. My goodness. And Mary, there's a lot of books on your shelf. So how many, again, have more books than you know what to do with? People, yeah, good. And how many of you have had people say to you, what? You have so many books. Why do you need a new book? That's me anyway. We're bookie people. So she had too many books. And she decided to discard a bunch of them. So she put a box together and picked books off the shelf. So I'm going to ask someone at random to tell us what it's like to pick books to toss out. So let's see, I'm looking around for people who are paying attention. Ella, have you ever discarded books? Yeah.
I have. It's an incredibly painstaking, difficult process, which usually results in me just reading the book again, because
The ones you're about to get rid of?
yeah, I have to validate as to why I'm getting rid of the book. I open it up and then there I am reading, and then nothing happens.
And that could not have been, Ella, a better introduction to this poem. Do you know the poem, Ella?
I don't. It's new to me. I haven't read it.
All right. Not a Cage would sound like a poem. It is dedicated to John Cage, her mentor. But it's not, the title does not come from John Cage. It was a random sentence from one of the books that she discarded. So she put the books out on the curb in a box. Then she felt really bad and guilty. So she decided, I'm going to touch each of these books before I let go of them. She knew that these are books she was not interested in, writers that didn't interest her. She was basically making a negative judgment. But as with Ella, feeling bad about making that judgment, decided to validate the negative judgment by opening each one of the books, by almost shamanistically touching each book before she said goodbye to them. And she chose the first line and the last line of each book she discarded and made a poem out of the first and last lines of each of those books. And one of the last lines was "not a cage," which is just too amazing. So it is an aleatory poem. That is to say, it is a poem of non-intentional chance operations. And so I'm going to play it for you, and then I'm going to put a link to the text, and then we'll just talk about what the heck she's doing, whether it's of value to you, whether you're interested in this kind of aleatory poetry, random poetry. It's clearly not about anything. It's about a box of books that she's discarding, written by poets and critics and fiction writers that she wasn't interested in. So here we go. Here's Joan Retallack.
Thing that I'm going to read is a poem dedicated to John Cage, which is called "Not a Cage," which is based on first and last lines from books that I was discarding or selling or giving away. I think as a way of assuaging my guilt for not having read them. I collected the beginnings and the endings. Scientific, sorry, I have two copies of this book here. It's not all fitting. Scientific inquiry, seen in a very broad perspective, may see foot 1957, also Wettermark 1906, chapter 13, To man seek, the world is twofold, in accordance with that witness is now or in the future. It wasn't until the waitress brought her Benedictine and she, Villandry, les douves, Parazé, le rideau, mine, yours, Cynthia, not a building, this earth, not a cage, the artist, disciple, abundant, multiple, restless, a forgery, opus, Loonus, Bellini, we named you. I thought the earth is possible. I could not tell to make live and conscious history in common and wake. You find yourself among and wake up deep in the fruit. Did you get the money we sent? I smell fire at full volume, stage dark. 1, Russia, 1927. God, say your prayers. You were begotten in a vague war, sidelong into your brain. In letter 3 and 4, as earlier, the narrator is North Dakota, Portugal, Moorhead, Minnesota. The lights go down, the curtain opens. The first thing we gun, Veronica wrote, the end, Wittgenstein. Tomorrow she would be in America. Over 40 years ago, a tense, cunningly moving tale by the hung. Then he moved on, and I went close behind. Interviewers. What drew a woman from Ohio to study in Tübingen? American readers with this issue, former subscribers to Marxist perspectives, the shadow of the coup continues to hover over Spain. In the ordinary way of summer, girls were singing like a saguaro cactus from which any desert wayfarer can draw, as is Mr. Fox, but in literature. 25 years have gone by. Yace, Digeron, Las Cosas Más Oscuros, the most obscure things have already been said.
I put the link to the text in the chat, but my question to you all is, and I'll start with Denny, because Denny's always game. It doesn't make sense. There's no sequence. It's a random collection of lines, first and last lines. So what is it? It's a poem for sure, but what is it?
You're asking for a definition? Well, it's
I'm asking for your impression.
my impression, yeah, that's a different question. My impression was that somehow I honed in on a word that randomly came out, which had to do with forgery. And it made me think of the whole element of errata and mistakes. And I mean, so I don't know. I guess I was thinking about ideas of unoriginality or something from that mention of forgery.
Let's talk about mistakes, Denny. It's Joan's favorite topic, really. And later on in our time together as a group, I'm going to post a poem or two from a book called Errata Suite. Errata Suite.
Well, there's a famous quote by Miles Davis, no mistakes, but opportunities, right?
Yes, let's riff on some more sayings. My grandfather used to say, "Hey, Al, come here. If you're not making a mistake, you're making a mistake." And that was my immigrant Jewish grandfather's way of saying to me, try stuff, Al. And clearly that's what she's doing here. So she is really interested in errors, because error leads you, pretty much every discovery that's ever been made by human Homo sapiens has been based on errors. So she's really interested. The passage you're referring to is not a building, this earth, not a cage. The artist, disciple, abundant, multiple, restless, a forgery. She got that from books she didn't like and was discarding. Damn. I wish I could make those kinds of mistakes. I wish I could write a poem based on stuff I didn't like instead of trying to write an academic book that's based on stuff that I admire. What if I actually based my next academic book on books that I disliked? Anyway, it's the possibilities are fecund. And the last line, and we're going to turn to Jennifer next. The last line is one of the most beautiful lines that I have ever come across in a poem. And it is the last line of one of the books she discarded. And it is, the most obscure things have already been said. That is probably, if you're looking for one line that embodied Joan Retallack's philosophy of art, it's that. The most obscure things, which is, all of her writing is very obscure and difficult, right? Everything has been said before. There's nothing new except for the arrangement. Jennifer Spector, what is your thought?
So many thoughts on this this poem that speak to not only poem talk, but the pieces that we read, especially ideas of porous borders and leaving official kingdoms of thought, domains of intelligibility that's understood and prescribed. And it really made me think of, in poem talk that we all listen to, or some of us have, so good, not quite done with it, but notices and arranges memory, which is what composing does. And she, I feel in this poem, like some have said in the chat here, that she's definitely playing, but she's doing serious play, because she's speaking to what Lynn also spoke to about the potential to contain, and our memory and our memoric kind of polyphonic adaptations that we make when we decide. We don't consciously decide what to remember, but our brain definitely doesn't contain everything that we've ever experienced, thought, or said, or felt. So I think in this poem, she's actually mimicking the discards that we consciously and unconsciously make. She's playing with chance, she's playing with randomness. And I think there's an emulation of cluster, kind of like an emulation of release and how we toss away and what we, if there's an intention to remember, then there's an intention to absorb and an intention to maybe discard. So I think there's kind of a play going on there with discard, memory, intention, absorption, and what it means, truly means to compose. And she's doing this with serious play. And I really love it because it's so generative. It's so, it's all about refuse and what's not important and what is important and how we consciously kind of move through that. So those were some of the things that it made me think of.
Really, really lovely. Thank you. That was great. I have one thought on that, and then I want to turn to Carla and then to Kathy, and then we'll offer up, some of us will offer up final thoughts for the evening. I think, I mean, Jennifer, what you said was great. And it makes me think that there are two ways to deal with the literary, the bookish past. One is libraries are obviously very important. They're our archive, but we all have personal archives. And I'm dealing with a member of my family who needs to get rid of everything because she's going into assisted living. And we're going through everything. And you've all been through it. It is so heartbreaking. It's exciting too, but there's no way you can do it easily because of course you take a box and you look through it and it reminds you of everything. I believe that this poem, interestingly, is a kind of recycling. In the, on garbage day, maybe you have a compost bucket and maybe you have your glass and your, aluminum cans and your paper separated from the stuff that's going in to the landfill. Recycling in that sense. I mean, she's getting rid of these books. In some ways, she's circulating them back in, but she's also retaining lines from them and making a poem that has now become almost canonical. Certainly in Modpo, it's a major poem for Modpo. So that generative is the right word. She's taking something, she's taking discards and turning it into a kind of conservation, but a playful random conservation, because she can't pretend to actually being, she can't pretend not to be throwing these things out. I just really liked it. There's an eco quality to this poem. Carla, and then Kathy. How you doing, Carla?
Really, really good. I really appreciate that you're doing this and that this is live and that it's not a webinar. So thank you 1,000 times
Sure.
for presenting everything in this way and having people be able to actually have a conversation with each other. It's wonderful. My question was, how is this poem different from a cento? It seems to me very much the same as a cento. And other than the fact that I didn't see where the lines are referenced,
Right.
but it seems very much similar to that.
Yeah.
And the title of the poem, I mean, I love, this is the first time that I've really been introduced to Retallack, and I'm falling madly in love with her. Her playfulness and her humor in the way that she uses form, the way that she does line breaks, I could go on and on and on. It's inspiring and fabulous. And what she seems to be saying in the title of this poem, to me anyway, picking out that particular phrase for the title, is that form is not a cage, that the way that we write poetry is entirely up to our sense of play, up to our sense of creation, up to our imagination. So I will leave it there.
Wow, Carla, that was so fantastic. Form is not a cage. It's only a cage if you imprison yourself by saying, I've got to write a sonnet in a certain way, and that's a cage. But form, she invented the form, or as you suggest, she's sort of playing on the cento and other forms. But it need not be not liberating. Sorry for that complicated logic. It need not be not liberating. Form can be freedom.
Mhm.
That's if we think of nothing else from this conversation tonight, maybe let's remember that one. That's pretty great. That's pretty great, because there was a period of the 20th century when, if William Carlos Williams, if you showed him a traditional form, he would spit at it. It's got to be free. You've got to be free. And what he meant was free form. Amiri Baraka felt the same most of the time. I want to be free, he said. I don't want to respect any of the traditional forms. Well, she's not using form traditionally here at all. But it's not a cage. She is not caging herself. And of course, she's also saying, John Cage, I dedicate this poem to you, but it is not a cage. The last regular comment of the evening, and then we'll get some final thoughts from various people. Kathy, hi.
Hi, had to unmute myself. I forgot. I just wanted to say that I found myself connecting more to her shorter poem pieces than the excerpts from the longer ones. And it may have been because I'm not all that familiar with her. And if I was dealing with maybe the whole long poem took all of that time, maybe I would connect more with the excerpts. But I kind of felt sort of like Lou did, and that with the longer ones, I almost felt like it was failed experiments where it was just complexity for the sake of complexity was kind of what I kept feeling. And maybe with more exposure, I might not feel that anymore. But with this last one that we were talking about, I thought it was really interesting that given that she was taking the first sentence and the last sentence of each book, it actually wasn't random, because the first sentence and the last sentence of any book or piece of writing is going to be the intro or the summary. It's going to be the entry or the exit. And so, although the books in some way were kind of random, what she was taking from them wasn't. And so I think she had a higher probability of success of having things that we could connect to.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it was just a thought, a compositional thought.
It's a great thought. It's a great point. You know, the Jackson McClough and John Cage and Joan Retallack and the others who believe in chance operations producing art, they never talk about random. They never say the word random. They will say non-intentional chance operations. That is to say, the system that she created, first and last lines of discarded books, then told her what to do as she picked random books from random in the sense that she didn't know in advance what book she would decide to throw out.
Yeah.
What she knew that they had in common was that she didn't want to read them anymore, or that she never wanted to read them, or that they're not to her liking. And that's a very interesting unifying concept from which to draw lines. It turns negative into a beautiful positive. And you're right, by picking first and last lines, she's trying to get the best, or at least the most lyric and thoughtful out of these books that she's discovered.
Yes.
So, I think you point out something that's really crucial. It is very systematic. It doesn't leave anything to chance once the process has been started. Okay, we come to the time when we take the last 10 minutes or so just to, I might cold call people just to hear what your final thoughts are this evening. Any thought at all. It could be about Retallack, it could be about us, it could be about what you want to do with your life. So Lydia, do you have a final thought tonight?
Yes, I just want to thank everybody, first of all, because I found it very, very useful, because I've been struggling with the poetry. And it's even hard to call it poetry sometimes. I'm still in a very much learning phase with this, but I can see why complexity is desirable, or I have been trying to understand further what it might mean and how it might be perpetuated. But I struggle with these extreme juxtapositions. I really do. Because it's like a joke I don't understand. You know, when someone tells you a funny joke and everybody else is laughing, but you are not, because you secretly don't understand it. And you're trying to grapple with it, and that's what I'm doing. But I will persist, and all will be well. Thank you.
Well, thank you for persisting, Lydia. And of course, you've been in ModPo for so long, you must have encountered many, many poems that were like that for you. And you came back not for the poems, but for the people, which is, you know, good enough, I would say. I'd love to hear Ravik, if that's the way I pronounce your name. If you have a thought, you seem to have been very attentive for the last almost hour and a half. What are your thoughts?
Hi, Al. Yes, you say Ravik. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I had a great time listening to you guys. There is such wisdom in the crowd, as people said. I believe some of your comments today have opened up my understanding. And it's like, you know, we read a sentence here and a sentence there from different poems, and suddenly the whole world of who Joan Retallack is comes into focus. And I guess the sentence that was most meaningful to me today was this, and I only have the sentence from her reading, so it's from None Too Soon. I tried to copy while she was reading out loud. I was copying because the text that was provided was so different. And I only have this one, but it's still very meaningful. Even so, hard to forget with recklessly yearning minds and thoughts that so intricately deform the musculature of a smile. And to me, that really opens up understanding her idea of the feminine. And even for me, the smile is, you know, being not from the United States originally, the smile is this American form, this American outward stance. And to me, that kind of opens up her rebellion. I see that as a rebellion, and that is very meaningful to me. So thank you for the time that you're taking with all of us. You have been so generous. It's really, really meaningless. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ravi. That was very kind of you to say. If Stacy doesn't mind, I would love to hear what you're thinking, Stacy. And then maybe Mary Newell would share a final thought if she likes. Up to you. No? Okay.
No, I'm happy to share. I'm very new at this, and I'm finding it really interesting, and I'm really trying to, you know, wade my way through Retallack and some of the other readings that I've been going through. I like the idea of hers that we should keep things complex, because I don't believe that we're ever going to be able to manage all the different variables in life. And I am reminded of a quote that I read in a book that from long ago called "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him." I think the author's name was Sheldon Kampf. It's a book about the pilgrimage of psychotherapy. And in that book, there's a quote that says, "The most important decisions are made on the basis of insufficient data," that we don't always have the precise answer or the exactness of a situation to be able to explain it fully and completely. And I feel that Retallack is telling me that that's okay. It's okay for things to be complex, and you should embrace the complexity. And that's all I have to say.
That is perfect. And it aligns well with what she's saying in the Poetical Wager about reality. She's trying to create a poetry that causes us to have to tolerate gray areas, to have to tolerate uncertainty, which for a lot of people is painful because there's so much uncertainty around. You don't want to go to look at art, to go to a film, to read a book, and get more uncertainty. I mean, is a conventional point of view. And I have learned over the years that I seek more uncertainty because that's realism. And it enables me to get up in the morning and face a world that is full of uncertainty, vague fear, an uncertain future. I think I'm better prepared having spent the night before watching a movie I don't understand, or reading a few paragraphs of a book that stymie me. And I think that at least my own experience with psychotherapy, my own experience as someone who's been to therapy, is that I finally found a therapist who said, there are no simple answers here, so we should probably just, let's live in the tough stuff. And I think art, the ethical art she's proposing, the poetics, is providing that, the tough stuff. Tough in the sense of hard to comprehend. And, you know, the world is made up of two kinds of people. Those who can't stand that, oh, please, I don't want any more of that. My life is complicated enough. And those who say, bring it on. That's what life is. Nothing's easy. All right, I'm going to turn to my friend Sophia Naz for the final word, because Sophia's always good at that. What do you think? You up for that? Sophia, say something wise.
Yes, I think I found out about, learned about in this process, and I'm more and more intrigued by the idea of feminism as the disruption of normative language is what I am, you know, this is what, you know, this is what I want to explore further, and just want to thank everyone, basically, and thank you for doing this.
So Sophia, your books are nearby. I imagine one of those books is one of your own books. Do you have one of your own books nearby?
Yes, I do. They're behind the shelf. Okay.
And read us one poem.
Okay.
Semi-randomly.
Randomly. Okay, randomly.
These are not books you're going to discard. What book is it? Which one is it?
Open Zero.
I have that one.
Okay, so really, I'll read a short poem. I don't know. Diary of the Pyrocene. Okay, this is totally random. From caterpillar to caterpillar, yellow beast, the generator, choke holding place, rerun, a movie plays, the mind reeling, a pall of smoke, and all of us bearers.
What was the last word? Betters?
Bearers, a pall of smoke.
Yeah.
All bearers, okay, yeah.
And all of us bearers.
Bearers.
Yeah, like bearing a pall, you know.
Yeah,
So.
all bearers.
Would you read it again?
Okay. Diary of the Pyrocene, and pyro is spelled Pyro, and then scene as in scene, you know, like a scene of a movie.
Yes.
From caterpillar to caterpillar. Caterpillar, the second one refers to the machine, the
right.
Caterpillar machine. Yeah. Yellow beast, the generator, choke holding place, re as in semicolon, run, rerun, a movie plays, the mind reeling, a pall of smoke, and all of us bearers.
Yes.
Wow, it's not a very upbeat poem to end with.
It's just random. Well, I mean, we're in the middle of another disaster, so maybe it's appropriate.
Oh, it's totally appropriate. Thank you all. Yes, Carla is posting a heart that seems to be twinkling somehow. That was very sophisticated, Carla. You guys are all great. We're going to be together in the forums until the 20th. And my semester gets very busy, but maybe I'll put the word out at the end after we finish. Maybe we'll do one more Zoom together just to get back together and share some final thoughts. So thank you all. You guys are great. At least the people who showed up are great. I don't know about the rest of them. I will, I'm going to post Not a Cage as a new thread tomorrow, so we can talk more about Not a Cage, and I'll put the links to the audio and everything. And then I think probably after that, we're going to go into the book called Errata Suite, which is a book composed of errors. Everybody know what an errata sheet is? Errata slip? Kat, you do, because it's in your business. What is an errata sheet? Sorry, errata suite sheet.
Yeah, so when there's mistakes in a book and there's not time to reprint it, a publisher will insert a slip saying page 73 contains this error and this is how it should read.
So Joan's really interested in the errata sheet as itself of an art form. And then she said the second word sweet is spelled 5, the number 5, U-I-T-E, sweet, 5, errata 5 sweet, errata fuit. So it's really a combination of errata slips and the musical staff. And she's combining those to create lots of little errata sheets. Very hard to read, very interesting. And I think I'm going to post 2 or 3 of those for us to try to grapple with. And she's read some of those, and her Pen Sound page includes some of them, so you can listen to her. And we'll do that, and then we'll improvise. I have no plan. I don't know where we're going. And that's the best part. And I also will make sure everybody hears about when Joan is coming to the Writers' House, so you can watch the live stream of Joan, or some of you can travel to Philly and join us for that. And there'll be a Q&A that Tuesday. So we'll be interviewing Joan, and you can call in with your questions and all that stuff, the usual thing. Okay, have fun wherever you are.
Thank you.
And for
Thank
you,
you. Thank you, Al. Thank you,
have a
everyone.
nice day today. That's tomorrow for us, but all right, take care. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye, thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.